Okay, you're recording now.
So Donna Kopecki present.
Tiffany Hughes present.
Tony Benedetti here. Sarah Fisher.
Okay. And Lisa and Nathan are absent for the record, I guess. We'll go ahead and move in. Do we want to segue into the decks and patios since we?
Well, I think you, per your agenda, you've got.
Or just go ahead with the enforcement report?
Code enforcement
Okay.
jump in.
That's fine. So did anybody have any questions about anything on the
Well,
report?
not that anybody here could answer.
Yeah, well, okay, fair enough. I do have a question. I noticed the swimming pool permits. Did we adopt the IPMC in its entirety?
We adopted the maintenance code, so it's what's in the maintenance code. And off the top of my head, I have to go back and double check that. I know there's a section on there in pools. We did not, if you recall, we adopted it with some adjustments for Minerva Park specifically, as a whole. And I'd have to go back and see my notes and what we chipped out of the original or added it, because I know there were some tweaks when I believe Michael Braun was still with us when we did that, if I remember right. So, but there is something on pools in there, I thought too.
Okay, yeah, I know, and the IPMC had something about pools, but I
Part of
didn't.
the pools they talk about having to be covered.
Correct.
Is one of the things that's not in the pool code, but it's in the property maintenance code. About
Yes.
pools. And there's not much else in the property maintenance code. The majority of the stuff, there's this whole section for pools
In our code itself.
in our code, yeah. 1480
Yeah, and I wasn't sure if that language, what was in our code, came from the IPMC, or if it was just,
No.
or if anybody had done any comparisons between the two.
No, it's Tony's right, it's not. It's, that code, and I'll bring it up real quick, the code, if I remember correctly, it's dated, right? So and it was copied, like a lot of municipal codes at the time, whether it was
Yeah.
89 in our case, or a little later, in the mid-90s, got copied from someone else that was working on it at the time to make life easier here in the
Okay.
village. And I think, I don't know who that was, if that
Okay.
was Worthington or Bexley, who knows, right? So,
And I was just figuring that when, I remember voting on adopting the
Yes.
modified IPMC. And
Correct.
I was thinking that what was in there about swimming pools would overwrite whatever was in.
the stricter, yes, the stricter, if there's a conflict,
The
general
stricter of the two.
interpretation is the stricter prevails, right?
Okay.
That's how we generally interpret code, from the way a court would also interpret it, okay?
Yeah.
On appeal
But-
of any type.
Yeah, and I was just trying to think from a resident standpoint. They wouldn't, I mean, I would know to look in multiple places, but
No.
they wouldn't necessarily know.
No, they wouldn't, and typically speaking, I don't know, quite frankly, most residents don't go read code before they do certain things. They may ask, and say, hey, can I do this or this, but that's the beginning of the research, I should say.
Yeah,
Generally, if they have a contractor, the contractor's responsibility is to know our code or to advise them on the code, and if they have a question, they ask us. If we're talking about pools from the temporary above ground types, generally speaking, those do not get researched before they're put up,
Oh, yeah.
very often. People just find a pool at Myers or Walmart and they put it up, right? Even if it's
And that's what we're facing right now.
Yes.
Is that there's
Yes.
a bunch of people are putting up pools
Correct.
and they have to put up fencing. It's the
Correct.
big,
yeah.
Because
yeah.
most of them are 4 foot deep.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Now,
definitely.
what I will tell you, interesting on this topic, this was brought up, and walking my own neighborhood in New Albany, I've seen a couple interesting examples. And one of those interesting examples was I saw a couple had a pool several feet high, and they were lounging in. Now, they had temporary fencing they had put around that patio, right? So, I would say it's like the height, the type you use to corral, whatever the requirements, it must have been 3 or 4 foot high, whatever the minimum requirement is. But it's the same type that you would use, say, if you were handling crowds at a concert, right? We've all seen those kind of low-level temporary fencing.
Oh, yeah.
But it was something on that type that they did. I have no doubt that they were told to put that up. The people just don't go out and do
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, they put their pool up, they got a visit from New Albany's code enforcement people, and they were said, hey, you can do this, but we require, I'd have to call code enforcement to confirm that, but seems like that would be the logical pathway that happens.
Well, that's what everybody's being told here too.
Yeah, and that would,
The people with these temporary poles have to get a fence around.
yeah. And unfortunately, you know, and I guess in the backyard, we already have a fence that meets just fine, but the problem with pools is, you know, there's a drown hazard, and that's also dictated, you know, our pool code, it's older, what's on the books, but there is also a pool code from the building department that they enforce, okay, and that you have to enforce from the state level, and it does require fences at a certain level, even in HOAs where they say you can't have fence in your backyard. You cannot tell people who if you're allowed to put an in-ground pool in, you have to be able to put a fence up around the in-ground pool for
Yeah.
code. So there's exemptions for that.
Okay, good to know. Yeah, I think that's the only thing I had a question on.
Well, isn't that, I mean, that's something we're gonna have to start talking about here, is pools. Because, you know, just like with decks and patios, the legislative committee, they wanna kick all this stuff back to planning and zoning.
Yes, so that's a good segue. So at the last legislative committee, why you have the decks and patios draft in front of you is because it was presented to them. They did quickly review it, but the majority of legislative committee wished it to be, start with planning and zoning, anything that happens to have planning and zoning requirements, right? So chapter 12 stuff especially is gonna have to come down here first as a matter of policy. So they want to see, council wants to see, as it was dictated, wants to see these things cleaned up, you know, post the legal counsel's legal opinion. Obviously, we have gray areas in the code, no one said we don't. Council will have the opportunity to review this after P&Z makes a recommendation, it's part of the legislation, they may or may not make changes. And then it may make it on the first reading if they so choose that they want to see things change, which it seems that they want it cleaned up, and then we would eliminate the conflicting code, which is right now in chapter 14. So,
What's the conflicting code with this?
under chapter 14, where you have chapter 14 code talking about decks and patios, and so we would change that up because this would become the applicable code for collecting permits. There'd be no question on whether or not we can collect permits. That's the idea behind the code. This code is there so that yes, we're going to collect a permit. Yes, these are the requirements for it.
This is a great segue here, Donna, and then I've been told over and over again that we can collect fees for decks and patios and all this stuff. Our code allows it.
It does.
But now, no, it doesn't really allow it. We've got to write some new ordinances that makes it so we can ask people to get a permit for a deck and a patio.
Legal counsel says we can, by the last opinion. Whether you agree with that or not, that's legal counsel's memo, and so we can. The
But-
fact of the matter is that it's
but-
not, it's gray code, right? It's gray code, and we've talked about this in the past. So we're cleaning it up now,
Yeah.
and so it's very clear. There's no argument anymore. You can't go into council meeting and say, you guys suck, we can't collect on this because this, and you're right, there's some question to it, right? So we don't want any question from the residents, we don't want any question from council, we want it to be very black and white. So this is the opportunity to review it and make it very black and white. Or council doesn't have to collect a permit at all if they so choose, right? They'll have the opportunity to vote on this. They can choose to get rid of the section of chapter 14, and they can choose to not collect anything.
So-
I keep referring to a section in chapter 14.
I thought you slipped with the code. You don't remember your code? Here, let me find it for you.
Okay, well, while he's doing his thing, can I ask what, since this is kind of your playground, like this is what you do and what you know a
See,
lot about,
this is your playground.
what do you think? Like,
Well, this is the greater conversation that council, planning and zoning, I guess, needs to have first, and I recommend council, is do we want to make people get permits for
and that's
temporary
personally, like, what your preference, what would it be? Yes or no?
to not.
Okay,
Yes,
that's,
that's
and
correct.
is there, is it just because you are in favor of letting people live their lives and do their thing? Or is it,
If we want to, just like with decks and patios, there is no description about what is an acceptable deck or patio.
Correct.
Now, if we want to start getting into that, then let's start talking about it.
It's in there, I don't know where he's talking, but there's section 14.
Yeah, it's under
Yeah,
14,
so-
it's under 1442.0, specifically as referenced in the legal counsel's
That's
memo.
permits and fees again.
But that allows us to collect and do it, period.
See, I'm done arguing with you.
I know, it's not me arguing, you're arguing legal counsel's opinion. And
This
so,
is,
it's a
this
moot point to
has to
some
do
degree.
with building permits.
I know, and counsel,
Okay.
and legal counsel said, no, actually it doesn't. So here's the thing that solves all the arguments. in front of you, okay?
If we decide this is what we want to do.
Yes, if people decide they want to collect, so legislative committee sent this down and said, hey, we want to start here, give us your opinion before we make it. So you can send it up and say, we don't think you should collect a permit on anything. That can be a response, right? Or you can send them a piece of legislation that then has a bunch of stuff filled in, and then they will choose the full council, and council can make the full decision whether or not they want something. So there's a number of ways that you can go about doing this. I will send this to the other 2 members who are not here, so that actually at the next meeting, the point of this is to give out the draft and not to make a decision tonight. The point of this is to put it in front of you, you got a couple of weeks before our next meeting, okay? And then the other members obviously be caught up because I'll send them the draft as well. And then everyone can have a full discussion at the next meeting, okay? And and hopefully we'll have everyone here, and they can take a vote on how, or they make changes, or whatever they want to do from a recommendation standpoint, right?
Okay.
Essentially where we're at.
Yeah, so like in an ideal world, we can address what we want a deck or a patio to be.
Yes.
And whether or not we want to propose permits be issued or fees be assessed or whatever. And that's fine, but from my perspective, I think that sometimes people need to be saved from themselves. And
Well, let's start with the patio.
okay,
Because that's the easiest one for me when it comes to not needing a permit. What is it about a patio that we need to oversee? Other than the placement?
So that's correct. So that would be the minimal thing. There are some times where municipalities want to review the materials, right? For example, a patio could also be an asphalt patio. Do you want that in people's backyards, right? Some municipalities don't want that, so they only.
and we've already got that over there.
Well, I just
Yeah,
want to
right?
point out,
Yeah.
they specify materials, right? So it can be stone, it can be pavers, it can be concrete, it can or cannot be a patio, it can be a number of other things. The definition is on as proposed, is on here. It can be changed. It's in there in draft on what a standard patio definition is, okay? And the primary purpose of a review from our standpoint, whether the materials are, you're allowed to have a material, much like a fence, chain link, not chain link, wood, not wood, any of those other items that the municipality may or may not want for the community. And beyond that, then there is where the patio is going, right? So typically speaking, if you're going to have setbacks, you want to keep people's patios away from, people want to have quiet enjoyment as
You
much
have to
as.
decide where you want the.
Correct.
Yeah.
Typically speaking, if we try to stay within setbacks, okay? Typically speaking, if you have a house, your house is built within certain setback ranges, there's a reason for that. You have a rear yard, then you have to kind of decide, there's some proposed language, yellow highlight here, where you would want to make potential changes. Is it 10 feet? Is it right on the line? Is it, typically speaking, most people don't want your patio, your deck to butt up right on the property line for any number of reasons, okay? They want to get some distance between you and your neighbors. And people generally make a common sense decision, but as you say, sometimes you have to make sure there's some clear boundaries, right?
Yeah.
Even with asphalt driveways here, or concrete driveways, there's a small line within our code that talks about it needs to be no more than 3 feet to the property line. So if we don't allow driveways to be built within 3 foot of the property line, I would say minimally that's your starting point, and that's in the front yard, by the way, not even the rear yard where people are congregating. So you want to think about how do people like to enjoy their rear yards, and what's a form of quiet enjoyment in most people's yards? Do I want to butt right next to each other? Typically no, right? But it's completely within the jurisdiction of the municipality to decide where the patio to go. Either 0 setbacks, or 5 feet, or 10 feet, or 15 feet, or wherever you want to make it within that box. So,
And to take this the next step, why I'm opposed to permitting. I'm not opposed to us setting requirements for decks, patios, whatever. But it doesn't have to get a permit. That's where and to understand where I'm coming from, I'm trying to reduce the workload for our staff. So having them, with all of these flipping houses, they're gonna be having decks and patios for the next, I don't know how many years, and the village. It is a huge workload to require permitting for all of this stuff that we are talking about requiring. And I believe that we can accomplish the same thing without requiring the permit. If you want to get into describing what is a good, or what's acceptable patio, you can have a code and say, this is all the stuff. And when the people call up and say, hey, I want to build a patio, well, these are the codes you need to follow. You don't need to get a flipping permit for everything you do around here. And that's what I am trying to eliminate. The unnecessary permitting, which it probably costs more money than we collect in the permit fee. If you talk about all the times people go out and look at stuff. So what I'm trying to do, and this is the most important thing, one of the biggest reasons that I got onto council, is to try to create a village that is not a pain in the ass to live in unnecessarily. And to me, all of this permitting crap is unnecessarily intrusive. It's not, the cost is not worth the benefit. And here we are, like I've been talking for, that we don't have any criteria for patios, decks, sidewalks, for driveways, for sheds. There are, well, I take that back. There are a few things about sheds. Like, it can't be less than 6 square feet. So, the rules about sheds it all needs to be looked at. Our fencing permit is another one that I think we can do it without requiring a permit, because as you know, you paid a permit, no one came out. What did they do? Nothing. They got your money and didn't do anything. And we really shouldn't be in the position of, I wouldn't like the village to be in the position of going out and saying, okay, your fence is in the right spot, and then find out that it's not in the right spot, because all we're going by was whatever survey that they provide when they turn it in. So I want to get out of that whole thing and have, when someone calls up about a fence or shed, patio, deck, except for decks that need to have a building permit, that's a whole other thing. And I understand that the code that he's referring to is talking about building permits, which is different from a permit from the village. And I would like to eliminate the unnecessary permitting. There are times, the one permit that we're going to be talking about that I'd be in favor of is sidewalks. Sidewalks and driveway aprons. That's one that I think we should have a permit for, because that's in the right of way. When we start talking about patios and decks and he's going on, well, you want it 3 feet back, you know what?
That's where you want it.
That's your opinion, and that's...
Doesn't matter to me, quite frankly. It's the only reason, if I may jump in, the only reason that we would collect, and it's up to the municipality, right? The reason the majority of municipalities collect it is, again, getting back to the thing where they say, there is a bit of saving people from themselves for a couple reasons. We can, so for example, and let me tell you this one, I don't disagree with what he's saying. In an ideal world, it would be wonderful not to have to collect permits. If there's a different method to review, if there's and I'm all ears for something different than what the standard model is, right? Something out of the box, something creative. But the problem we run into from a professional, city management standpoint is that people will do things. They will put in a patio, right? And then what happens is people complain, right? Hey, how can you do that? And then we have to go out and say, dude, look, your patio is actually right on the property line, and we did adopt code that says it needs to be 5 foot back. You didn't have to submit a permit, so now you got to move it. So now it creates a whole bunch of rigmarole. If people always, as a standard, if people know they have to go and ask at the very least, do I need a permit or should I get a permit, then it's an adopted form of behavior that people come to you and say, do I need this? And then we say no, but make sure you do this. If we're pretty much a no permit village, which I can tell you very rarely exists, I mean, I'd have to go hunt down cases like that. Townships are a little bit more like that, but the reason municipalities do it is, when we have density. Okay, we have density, people are kind of on top of each other. I don't have a 5-acre piece of land.
That's why Minerva Parks can be different.
Yes, and that's his dream, and I wish him well in his dream. He's got at least 3 other council members to convince in this journey, okay, for any of these things. And I know there's varied opinions on council, right? And so I'm simply going to tell you, look, you can adopt, and you can make a recommendation for anything you want. I'm going to tell you that permits are an accepted model of review because we try to make sure people are aware of what they need to do. There can be no argument that I didn't know, well, it's on the books, you should have reviewed or at least called us, right? And the same thing can be said if you just put it in there, but we don't want people to expend money unnecessarily because if they spend money to put it in, they're gonna spend money to move it and make it right, and it's costing them more money. And so at the end of the day, the permit structure overall, for the majority of people, saves them time and money, which is what we want to do. And so that's my only 2 cents.
But I can tell you of several cases where people came in and got fence permits and went and did whatever.
There's
the hell they
always,
want.
that's right, but that's their fault. But in that case, they are definitively told they're okay with a certain way of designing it. If they choose, there's no excuse in that case. Once they're caught, nobody feels bad.
The code's
Right?
the code,
I feel that.
whether you make them get a
Yeah.
permit or not, if
Sure.
you don't do it according to the code, they're gonna have to.
Don't disagree.
It's a
Don't
life
dis-
lesson.
don't
You
disagree with
shouldn't
that
have-
statement.
You shouldn't have built your patio in your neighbor's property.
Also don't disagree with that statement at all. One of the reasons we do it is just so we can help people save them from themselves. It
And
really
I,
is.
and that's another, argument, I would put that it's not our responsibility.
Yep, and that's fine.
That's, yeah,
You know,
and, I mean,
That's fine.
I agree with that, but,
That's why some of
I
these
feel like it is
towns-
more of our responsibility when you're charging them.
yeah,
Well,
yeah, well,
yeah, I mean,
and I
and
guess,
that's why that's why I'm against the fence permit, because we go out and say, yeah, we checked and we approved that, and then when we find out that it's not in the right spot, we're the ones on the hook.
well, and I know my contractor didn't dig 36 inches
We're
down,
certainly not on the hook.
you know what I mean? Like,
We are
I,
never on the hook, I can tell you that for free.
Well,
No, but even if I were to make a mistake, we are not liable for my error if it was in the code that has to be done a certain way. I'm available for this code enforcement officer being human, we make mistakes, there's plenty of case law that says
well,
otherwise. Well established.
I'm not gonna disagree with that, but that also brings up the issue I hear all the time about, well, do we have, okay, are we gonna be liable if someone drowns in a pool because we don't have a code?
I don't know, that's a very good question, I would refer you back to legal counsel.
No,
Because
we're not
again,
liable.
it's not our code, and it's actually state safety code, so I don't know, that's a good question, Tony, that one I don't know, right? I've never had to deal with.
I've heard that argument made.
I understand
Is
that,
that,
I don't know that it is.
I find it hard to believe that
Yeah.
that we would be liable because we don't have a code that says your pool needs that
You're
fencing
usually,
around it.
as a municipality, you are liable under negligent conditions typically. For example, if we have been told there's a pothole, right? And a hole, that we have been made aware, there are people who've called in their emails, there's proof that we have been made aware, and nobody went out to fix it. Nobody, the mayor didn't make someone do it, the staff didn't do anything, went on for weeks, right?
Right.
Somebody hit the hole, wrecked the car, killed someone, right? We can be in trouble for that. That's an
Right.
example of negligence,
Right,
right?
right.
Willful negligence.
But a pool at somebody else's house.
Yeah, that's a little harder, and I would think that we're not, so.
Well, that's what I've heard that from someone here, saying that if we didn't have a code, about
Yeah.
fencing.
I think the easiest thing to say about that is,
That was-
anybody can sue you for anything.
Yeah.
It's just the headache that you gotta go through to get, like, are you responsible at the end of the day? Probably not.
I think if my kid, the whole purpose of that code of fencing is because in the past, toddlers wandered over to someone's property and drowned in their pool.
Oh, it's happened,
That
yeah.
code was put on the books for that purpose, if I recall correctly.
Oh, yeah.
If the homeowner doesn't do that under state code, and my toddler wanders over and drowns in the pool, I can sue that guy, I can't sue the village, right?
Right.
I would sue the person that caused the liability.
Well, I'm just telling you what
Yeah.
brought up.
Understood.
But, but that, I'm gonna say, get back to pools, is that's the thing that I think we need to do here in Minerva Park, is differentiate between an in-ground pool and an above-ground pool, like all these temporary ones are. Because I am 100% supporting fencing around an in-ground pool, where somebody can just wander in, a little kid or whoever, can wander in and fall into it. But when you have these above-ground pools where it requires a ladder to climb up into it, I think that ladder is the point that you can, where the safety would come into play, is removing of the ladder.
and I think that was
not
part of the
requiring-
IPMC.
What's
I think that was part of, I think
There was
that's in
some
the
village, I
IPMC.
agree. If I recall, even under the state building code, there's something in there regarding ladders on a true above-ground pool, not the temporary blow-up pools, right? I'm not- I'm
Yeah,
talking
and so
about
the
a true
blow-up pools
blow-up
are a
pool.
completely different issue, because
Yeah.
a toddler could fall into it and literally just fall into the pool.
Yeah.
Even
Well,
if
not
it's,
the ones that are 3 feet high.
Oh,
That's,
So,
They're
so
just-
the-
I mean, I was talking about.
Some of them are just plastic.
There are-
The one that we have at our
There's just a
house.
ring around the
Okay, well,
top
there's
that's
the little
inflated.
ones, there's little ones that are, maybe,
yeah,
well, but that's part of our code, only
It's,
only calls out for pools that are over 2 feet.
yeah, and that's specific, and I believe that's drawn, and again, I'll have to, again, this is, pools are, these temporary above-ground pools are an interesting, yet controversial issue for municipality to municipality, okay? Because at the end of the day, it goes back to what the state code says regarding pools, and then you're able, you have to adhere to that regardless of whether you have an above-ground pool or an in-ground pool. When you get these temporary above-ground pools, that's a whole different ball of wax. And so some municipalities have chosen to handle them under the zoning code, some have handled them other places in their code. So it requires a bit more reading from this body before you make a recommendation, is all I'm saying. There's a lot more to it.
Okay.
I think the first step is looking at our code.
Yeah, our code's got our stuff in it, and it is what it is, but you still have to adhere to regular code.
I kind of feel like when we're talking about making changes to all of these codes, whether it's deck, patios, pools, we should start with the premise of, let's figure out what we would want in the ideal world. Forget what we have, forget all of that. What do we want? And then make it happen.
I'm 100% behind that.
And
We
because
can argue.
there's no need to look at what we have. If
Well, I think
it's
with pools, it's
conflicting
maybe a
or
place
it
to
doesn't
start.
meet our needs.
Right.
Like, what do we want? And then find best practice from, use somebody else's time and effort to identify what fits based on what we want. And then,
Well, I think, if we had to put something to the top priority list, it'd be pools. Because right now there's and who knows if we even found all of them that are out there. I know there's.
Oh,
at least
no, there's a lot.
3, 4,
Yeah.
right
You
now.
don't know, and I mean, again, most of them are in their backyards, not everybody's yard's fenced, so there would be no way for us to,
it'd be really hard
when
to
you're just
tell.
driving around, I mean, I couldn't tell you if there's a pool in that backyard over there. Or, to be honest, I don't think I could tell you if there's any in those backyards. The only way you're gonna know is if you go back there.
Well, or they, in the cases of the ones, you can see them from the street.
Yeah, but again, that's only because they don't have a crap ton of fences over there yet.
All right.
So, but
Um,
these over here with all the trees and stuff, yeah, you can't see back in most of them.
Yeah, so I guess the only reason that it might be worth considering a permit for something like decks and patios is, I think the price point in Minerva Park for home sales is lower than it is in most surrounding areas, and people that are gonna buy here are more likely to have government-backed loans. And when you have an FHA loan, VA loan, that sort of thing, they really scrutinize the exterior of the home. Anything on the outside of the home, they consider to be expensive repairs, and those are things that they're gonna wanna have fixed before they can proceed with the loan. And so, like, old windows or something like that, that could be an issue on this side. But if somebody decides they wanna put in a patio and they're using pallets because they saw it on Pinterest,
Would you
that.
say pallets?
Yeah, pallets. Everybody's making everything out of pallets because they're cheap
I
and.
knew a guy like that.
Yeah, so, but at the same time, a homeowner is thinking, or a buyer is
Well,
thinking,
but
I'm
they-
buying a house with a patio, and now suddenly they can't get a loan because it's a piece of crap. Build out a couple of pallets. I think,
I think
it
you're
could, I mean, not only do we have to worry about the beautification aspect and, people having to look at that ugly thing, but we also have to worry about houses not selling in a timely fashion. We're talking about 5 days on the market from, start to finish.
Part of code can be the defensive evaluation of the community, right? That's part of the reason you have codes,
Yeah.
right? That is, it's one way to look at it, okay?
Yeah.
Saving people from themselves is one, defensive evaluation, when people, the reason we require certain materials is because, yeah, we're not gonna allow, as an example, chain link fences because they actually devalue properties. People view them as not a want in those cases, right?
Yeah.
And so that's one reason that you see a lot of chain links have gone the way of the dodo in most communities, right? They're just not allowed. It's more expensive materials. Patios can be the same thing. You can simply say, I want A, B, and C material, and that's it. I don't want these other ones. I don't want
Yeah.
pallets, which you just wouldn't list it, right? I don't want any asphalt.
But even if somebody said they wanted to use brick pavers,
Yeah.
I mean, that can be a beautiful thing.
Can.
Or you can get a homeowner who is cheap and lazy
Yeah.
and doesn't take the time to level things, and now you've got all of this,
I understand, but that.
like trip and fall
that's-
hazards and stuff,
I
which
was-
it's gonna have to be taken out and redone.
I understand. So I would simply say that,
I want to get into it.
yeah, and I would concur with this, is that unlike a building department review deck, because a deck gets into structure issues, attachment house safety, where it does have to be level under the code, and that's a different issue. Patios are a little funny, because patios can be okay, I can put a stone patio in, and it's not gonna be a perfectly flat surface like this floor.
Yeah.
Right? You may want to create a patio that is built from uneven stone because of its aesthetic look. Now, is it my preference? No, because it's hard to move chairs over, and you do skip your feet on it a little bit, but some people have them, right?
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that, they can be very beautiful and well done. And again, I built my own patio, and my first go through with a paver was that I was a little off. I had to pull some of it out and put it back in, right? When I was a younger man, and that's fine. That's a learning experience. Generally, people, the beauty's in the eye of the beholder in a lot of cases, right? You can't control well, you can try,
I like to put it
double
as a-
tries.
I should be allowed to do shoddy work, with the understanding that.
It's your
just like
shoddy work.
It's my shoddy work, and I'm gonna have to go back and fix it in another year or two, or whatever.
And that-
I mean, that's what I would prefer to, that's what I'm talking about, the character of the village. I hear what you're saying, but that's not the kind of village I want this to be. It's like, I think we should have, some criteria for the types of materials for decks and patios, but getting into this permitting thing and going out and overseeing it, we should have codes that have a specific, criteria for these things. Not opposed to that. It's this whole permitting thing, that is unnecessary in my opinion. And
So, it's one of those things, so you can start with criteria, that's an easy starting point, right? It's on there.
And I think everybody can agree that we need,
Yeah.
that's what I say about with decks too, is that here we are, we got all these people with deck permits, but we don't have any criteria other than the building code issues. They could build a deck out of whatever they want right now, because we don't have any code that describes design and materials.
As long as they do have to meet certain criteria for strength of materials, right? And so they will have to
All
buy.
building code kind of stuff.
Exactly. So, but that's a widespread thing, right? And again, I don't think you're gonna say you can't have composite like truck stacking. You're not gonna say you can't have cedar. The real most
We
likely.
could say no pilot, no pallet.
Yeah, but you can list, it's better to list what you want, because it's gonna be a shorter list than what you don't want, right? Really, you're gonna say, these, just like here, the materials constructed from those materials. You can have as many there as you want, or as little as you want. Those are the only things that would be allowed, okay, within Minerva Park.
And I think that's how we address your issues of having quality,
Yes.
products being built. And, like I said, the permitting thing is, to me, is something that, that's two different issues. We need to have criteria, standards for sheds. We already have it for fences.
There are some criteria, if you remember, because
Well, there's yeah.
you have to have material, the language they use is that you have to have material that's comparable to the house's material.
That's the code in the new development.
Actually,
Did we put that into ours?
we put it into, yeah, it's not development text. So under Dolminger, that was in motion when I came on board, and they passed that at some point in 2017. So specifically under, what was it?
I've looked at it, and
Yeah,
like I said,
it's
that's the
there.
one that says it has to be over 6 square feet, which I've never.
And it has to no more than 200 square feet. So they,
Well,
So is that big enough for like what, a shovel and
I
maybe a
don't
rake?
know. It's-
The rake's gotta sit
you
outside.
buy those really cute little small ones, that's
Cute
what they're
little
saying. You
small
can get
ones.
all kinds of.
Well,
Okay, so here's a dumb question. I'm gonna cut you off. What would we have what would be a permit for landscape? Am I
I
crazy?
don't know.
The landscape, I'm sorry, what do you mean?
It just says landscape.
Oh, where's that, did I leave
On
something?
Quiet Vale, so I know it's in the brand new section. What would we have permitted something for landscape?
I don't know, you have to ask him, because it may have been some weird landscaping feature or something they did, he may have some.
Yeah, maybe it's like a feature of some,
It also, it's one of those things to where a review standpoint, like somebody puts, so here's the other side of it. We review what people put, as an example, in our easement along the rear fence line, right? That's our
Okay.
easement 20 feet against our fence. We don't want people putting things right up against our fence. That's why we review the fences that go back, that's why they can't cross them. And even putting trees and stuff in there is a no-no, right? We don't necessarily want people growing things up and damaging the fence. So we have say, because it's our easement. So I don't know what he did there, it's just an example of what could have been reviewed.
I'll ask, just, because council's probably gonna ask that.
Technically, any landscaping in the right of way would also be within our purview review, because it could block someone's view, right?
Again, this goes back to, I'm shocked that anybody came in here and said, do I need a permit for this? I guess that's where I'm at.
Does it say on the?
All it says is landscape.
Did he initiate it or did?
No, it's a permit. So I would assume they did. So again, it's just one of those things that it's shocking to me that people actually, like, I would never have thought to come in here and ask for a
And
permit.
it could be maybe they wanted to change out the street
Trees or
trees.
something.
The street tree,
Yeah.
because that is in our code that they have to get
They
permission
do?
to make any changes there,
Yeah.
so.
They do. We'd have
They
to-
could
Maybe
have
it
been,
was.
they
That
just
could
didn't
be.
like whatever was planted there or something.
Yeah.
That totally could be.
But I would have, well, I would have, if I was them, I'd be having to have my kid in a permit to replace the street tree.
Especially if it's only been a week.
There are trees now, that's the thing, so there are
Okay.
actual trees.
So are we doing anything with the decks and patios
No,
yet?
it's just for your review and
Okay.
discussion, which you have plenty of discussion tonight.
Yeah.
There's no need to, because the other members have to see it, and I will have an apron, right-of-way language to
Okay.
review by the 15th as well, too. I'll get that out to everybody in a week, so it should be good. That's all I got for those.
Green space planning.
Yeah, that's just on, there's a continuing discussion since Lisa has presented her document last time. Like I said, there was a resident who contacted me and I told her we were gonna have, it's a continuing discussion point to
Right.
come in. She chose obviously not to come in this evening, so I'll just reach out and say, we have the next one on the 15th, if you wanna come comment. Because obviously the commission, I'm sure, would like to hear from residents who are backed up against the green space, so, which, you know, is always a good thing.
I would love to see, humor me here, discussions of what to do over by the basketball court, like sooner rather than later. So as far as a green space planning, like, and the only reason I'm bringing it up is whether or not, and maybe the answer is gonna be no. But that would be an area that, again, I know we've had a lot of talk and issues, problems, concerns. Being able to, we have one small trash can over there, obviously nobody uses it. But maybe getting another, maybe a prettier trash can would help. I'm joking.
One with a hoop and.
Yeah, one with a hoop, that was my thought.
Yeah.
And just so you know, I do have, if it's early enough, I do plan on going over there today. Because again, I went over there the day that,
It's hot on the Facebook page, someone.
it was Lisa.
Okay.
So, but I'm gonna go over there and say something to him. Again, I think, and don't take, Lisa, if you listen to this, don't take this wrong. Instead of posting it, go over and just ask him. Because the other day I went over there and I talked to him about something, watch your mouth, whatever. I think you can, again, I know that other people have different ideas, but my view is I just go over there, talk to him, I'm nice to him, tell him to have a great time, have fun, whatever. Don't bring 300 of your friends, we're gonna have to shut you down, you're nice to him. But I have no problem going over there and saying, if you guys don't figure out where the trash can is, I'm gonna shove these water bottles up your rear end. But anyways, I think that seriously, there's a nice way to go over there and just, look, you guys are gonna get me in trouble, you've gotta do this. So, go pick it up. Somebody take the initiative to do it. So, again, I think just going over there and having a conversation with them, I know some people some people don't wanna do that, they don't feel like it's their responsibility, or maybe they don't feel like it's their job, that's fine, I will go over there and say something. So if we get out of here early enough, I'm gonna go straight there and just say, look, do it. Point being, is there something more of a permanent structure that we can get for a trash can? Is there any desire to do a more permanent structure of a structure? The things that come to mind is that is one of the areas that they were talking about for, the block party, the large block party. I don't know that that's where they're gonna end up having it, but, that's one area that has open space. It would be nice to find somewhere in the village that you could pop up, if we just did some sort, again, basic structure, I'm not talking bathrooms. I mean, is that something later on down the road? Whatever. I'm talking about a basic structure, 2 picnic tables, something along those lines. I understand we're in COVID, but this isn't gonna be built in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But by next summer, people could actually, let's humor me, rent to do small birthday parties. I mean, a 6-year-old birthday party outside. We're not talking about anything crazy. Is that something Becky's gonna wanna have to deal with? Yeah, I don't know. But again, they could, or it's just first come, first serve. If they wanna go out there and have a little whatever they can. I'm not trying to bring up 300 people into a little area. I'm just talking about something simple. Does anybody have any interest in that? Or does anybody have any other ideas for that particular area to make it more, do you leave it open? Do you guys want to, you're not planting plants and all of that with a basketball court. You're just not.
Are you talking about the north parcel, which is open?
Correct.
Okay, that's what I wanted.
Yeah, so
That's
just-
where we put a structure in.
Yeah, and again, I don't even know what size. I'm not talking 10 by 10. That would be way too small.
Yes.
But again, I'm also not talking about something that's gonna make these residents crazy, you know, that all of this is going on. I'm not talking about, you know, Boombox Central and, you know, kids are having a 400 people party. Just something that, if it's your child's birthday in the summer, mine's in the winter, so it wouldn't help me, but something that they could go do. Maybe you don't, maybe you wanna turn it into putting some soccer goals out there. Just a thought. I don't know. So has anybody thought about what we could do over there? Does anybody have any interest in doing an actual structure? And then, you know, just kind of going from there. I mean, I would like to talk about the actual green space planting stuff when Lisa's here more, because I don't have anything, everybody knows I don't have a green thumb and I don't know anything about plants or whatever, and I'm gonna be like, okay, Lisa, that sounds good, let's do it. Cause I don't know. I'm just gonna be real. But structures and different things like that, that's one of the ones that I'm super interested in. If there's an appetite to do something like that, I would love to get moving on
I
it.
think that area is, that we need to start talking about it, you know, because you've already, that's close where the apple trees are all at.
Yeah.
You know, so we're heading in a direction now.
Right.
With a basketball court,
Mhm.
playground across the street already, apple trees.
Right,
you know, so
like a little
I think we
family
gotta
area.
Keep going with that area, and I believe that there would, except for the people around there, a lot of support for a shelter, kind
Right.
of a picnic table, and you know, Westerville, they rent theirs out.
That's what and I don't know that we would do, I mean,
Yeah, I don't
that's
know.
one of those that, and I'm not saying for a fee or anything, but just so we would have a running tally of who,
Well, you can reserve it or
reserve it,
something.
yeah.
And, yeah.
I don't think we would be looking to like make money on it or anything like that, just again, another perk for, you know, we're not charging people basketball times or anything, so, although that is an option, just saying. We could
Well, I
just,
think you know, the rural thing is something that we have to, you know, put up a sign that has the basics, no cussing, no whatever.
well, and I know that there's been a little pushback on some of that here and there as to whether or not, and this is just a general question, can we do that now? Is there any reason that we cannot put, and I'm just saying, I know we don't own it, but it would, or could we,
MI can put a sign up for us, right? So if MI, again, they've been very cooperative. If we say, hey, here's our rule set, do you have any issues with what we're putting up there? Now, it's private property, so
Right.
authority, arrest authority is a little different.
I don't think we would have those kind of rules. I mean, mine would be, you know, no cussing, throw your crap away, and, you know, or clean up after yourself, no cussing, and,
Well, the littering,
There
there's a
is a
sign
code.
offense,
Yeah.
right?
There's a code for littering, I'm sure.
Exactly.
right,
So the thing is though, it's on a piece, here's the interesting thing, it's not our public ground, they're not throwing it into the right of way, they're throwing it on a piece of private ground. So it becomes an issue, just like I'm out in my backyard, and I'm throwing my trash in the ground. Now, can I be cited under zoning code for debris causing problems, things like that? Yes. It is not the same as being able to issue a citation for littering. That happens within the public realm, right, which right away or public grounds, right?
Well, that would be
because it's
public
private,
ground.
yeah.
When it
When it
transfers.
gets turned over.
Yes,
Okay.
right now it's not, it's private ground, so them throwing cover, we just have to help out and clean it up. Obviously, we can put up a sign with MI's permission right now, you can't enforce the rules the same that we could on.
And I don't need, I think
public.
like everybody's alluding to, if we just had a couple little basic rules, you know,
Yep.
no, you know, closed at dark type thing, and they've been, my understanding is I went over there at 9, it was like 9:05,
Yeah.
one of the very first nights I put it back up, and, they were gone. So I texted Brian, and I was like, what happened? He was like, what do you mean? I was like, they were gone. He was like, yeah, they always just leave it dark. Oh, and it wasn't dark, it was like this, I mean,
Yeah, they
I was
get
like-
home too.
yeah, so, but again, it was amazing, they left, you know, and I don't think that's been an issue, but, you know, those would be my basic things. Closes at dark, or closes at 9, or whatever, I mean, I don't care what people do, no cussing or whatever. I know somebody mentioned no loud music, and I'm like, you can't really, it's still a park, I don't know that you can, I guess you can, but,
Again, once it becomes, because, again, even if it's private property, and if you're becoming a nuisance, like, you can be told to knock it off.
right, but it still has to be, and I'm only gonna point, and I'm not judging, because
Yeah.
again, if it were me living right by there, I also would not want the music that comes up from my basement blaring out the house, just saying. And I shouldn't say that with this recording, cause I've heard it. But, you know, I'm walking on the bike path and there's a house that always has music blaring out back, and it's great for me because I enjoyed the music, like it's great for me when I'm walking past, but I'm thinking, the first thing that does go off in my head is, do these neighbors care? Because this is on the path, it's, so, but it's her house.
Yeah.
She's enjoying her back deck, she's, you know,
That's
laying,
what I tell people,
Yeah.
it all depends on who your neighbors are.
oh, yeah,
Yeah.
It does.
And there are times when people move in and don't like their neighbors and they gotta move.
yeah,
That happens.
Yeah.
But there are limits, right? So if you've got a guy blaring music at a certain decibel level, and
Right.
it's a damaging level,
Right.
that can be proven, that's not
and I know
allowed.
there's a
That's
timing
nuisance,
issue too.
Right?
Yeah.
So if I've got lights that I'm taking, I'm shining onto my neighbor's,
Right.
my neighbor's bedroom every night, just to be a jerk, and I'm not listening to anyone, that's a nuisance issue. It can be-
Right.
Can
And
be
I
dealt
think
with.
we have codes that cover those.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
do, we do
Right.
quite frankly.
But
So-
again, it's private property right now.
Yeah, so in this case, what would happen is, the worst case scenario from an enforcement action is that if people go in there after dark, that becomes an open trespass issue, right?
Okay.
And so our police can't act upon trespassing in that case, from what I understand about it, right?
Okay,
But MI would have to tell us that's okay.
Right.
Which is fine, they probably don't want people
Right.
meandering, causing problems there either after a certain time period, so we would just verify that with them.
so I mean, again, that's not anything we have to go any further on tonight, that's entirely up to you guys. But it is something, that's just one area that I feel like maybe, again, it would look like, I mean, we do have Parkland Fund money, we do have, and I am not the person that gets to like pinpoint what that money's for, but I have always been of the mindset that the Parkland Fund, because they are the ones that contributed that money, that the money should be spent in that particular section. I know it can be spent at the pool, and I know it can be spent here at the community building around the lakes and all of that, but I'm one that believes that that money should, majority of that money at least should be spent over in all of those different sections. So whether it's the plantings or, you know, any of that kind of stuff, like I don't necessarily wanna see it spent at the community building. I feel like that's stuff that we could do. So I know that we have funds to do those types of basic things. I don't know if anybody wants to come up with, this would be a good size for something like this, or go over and look at it. Is this something that we don't wanna do?
I wanna start talking pickleball.
And I mean, again, when you go over and look at it, you guys may say, oh, you know, maybe we should do more of this, or maybe we should do more of that, but I guess that would be, that's one of my top priorities, only because I don't know what to plant anywhere else. And then, you know, I know that we've talked about the sledding hills, I know that we've talked about additional plants for like,
Lisa said
Apples.
she had a
She does.
spot for the sled.
yeah, I think that we'd, well, yeah.
I don't know where she's talking about.
So, you know, I think that maybe on, sorry, maybe ahead. All right. John sends me nightly updates.
Nice.
So no, I mean, and I don't know if anybody has any other areas that they're really interested in trying to start with or whatever. That was my thought for green space.
I
And,
still haven't been completely through all the paths yet.
oh, I walk it every day.
Through. I
So,
know there's that one area that I wouldn't say bothers me, it's just wild tree, I'm not sure what the road is, you know, but it's like there's houses, you know, and behind their houses, it's just overgrown.
Right.
I don't know what resort
Well,
that is.
here's my
What we're
theory.
gonna do with that mess.
this is my opinion on that, and I don't know that anybody has any appetite to do this. Is next more of an actual meeting, or is it more of a
It's a
work
work session,
session?
type of thing. It can be an actionable meeting, because you're gonna have things on the agenda to action.
So,
Action on it.
Honestly, we did this a little bit with council. I would love to take a field trip over there. Even if we came in 30 minutes early or 15, you know, you need at least 30 minutes. To being able to visually see some of the different things, because I understand we can look at maps, but when you see how wild the grass is,
Yeah.
And I think
And-
that's where Lisa's a little upset that people are starting to cut that grass.
well, and that's why I think we need to walk over there.
We've
I
discussed
mean,
it, yeah, it's an issue.
yeah, I think that's something that, it would be nice to go over and, you know, for her to go, this is, and for me, it would be really great because, and you, we're getting ready to start talking about a maintenance team versus, you know, now we're kind of getting off the topic of this, but walking through there and us getting a vision of what we actually want it to look like. I'm not saying that we're the final say-so of it, but do we like the way that it's being cut? Are we planning on doing it different? Because in order to get a quote, we need to know that. And that's stuff that we need to know now.
That's something that I think in that particular area is something that needs to get like bush hog once
And
or
it might
twice
be.
a year.
So I feel like, I mean, for me, I'm a
To keep
visual.
it from, because if you just let it go and don't do anything, it's gonna just get to be a mess.
I have a bunch of those areas that I
Or
have
you
no
could
idea.
just let it go.
What eventually happens, so right now it's more of like meadow, right? Meadow grass, tall grass, and it supports a certain type of wildlife, and you know, and that's fine, people aren't gonna go romping through there, right? Eventually it will change over to, you'll see over the years, change to trees.
Right.
That's eventually, and that's perfectly, that's a natural progression of how that will go. And there's nothing wrong with
That's
leaving
where I
that.
guess maybe you can get the residents in there, because obviously there's some people that don't like the grass growing up against the fence.
Well,
You know, it's why they're, or for whatever reason.
no, you're right, they're trying, what happens is people try to claim out into they have to be told, and essentially, we talked about this, they have to be told, stop dumping your stuff back there, stop cutting it, it's not your property, right? You can be in trouble for it, so that's where we're at with that. Until a decision is made by the council as to how maintenance, and people shouldn't be taking it into their own hands.
Yeah, and there's some areas where I think I'd love to see the residents take it on. You know,
Uh-huh.
when their backyards come down to the pass, you know, right here, you know, that'd be nice if they took it over, but then there are other areas, you know, so you get into that
Right.
conversation, who you tell you can and you can't.
Right. But I think that's one of those things that, again, I'm just a more visual person. I would rather go through
Yeah,
there
me
and
too.
say, okay, this is like, this is me. I'll go through there and I'll say, this is absolutely disgusting, awful, and, you know, Lisa's gonna be like, no, this is why, you know, da 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 da, and then I'll be like, okay, makes sense. I mean,
Yeah.
that's why I'm a visual person, because I'm not gonna understand why this needs cut and this doesn't need cut, but she'll explain it too. This is why you want it like this is why, and I'm not saying she's the voice of everybody, but she is the person that does help me understand what we're trying to do in certain areas. And even though it's not like the number one most important thing for me, it's important to the residents. So therefore, I think we need to make sure, I would say a majority of the residents, those are the things that are important to them. I just can't keep anything alive, so, you know, and I don't have the time. I would love to say I have the time. I don't have the time to do it. So Lisa is like the one that I trust, and I think a lot of people go to her and ask her questions, and I think, you know, that's, so if anybody has anybody else that they would like to get their opinion on, I just think that the 15th, that would be great.
We were talking about the parkland funds. Can that money be used for the ponds, like for the aeration?
Yes, the
Okay,
answer is
fine.
yes, it depends on what council appropriates it for that, and approves,
Okay.
appeal that.
I didn't know if
That's all.
equipment was included in
No, I
that, or
Yeah,
if it
no,
was
no,
all
I
just
mean, the funds,
landscaping kind of.
yeah, I mean, there's capital funds, parkland funds, kind of, you're using it to support the parkland, so it's more of an operating fund type.
Okay, that's good. to
Well,
know.
and it's pretty wide, I wouldn't say wide open, it's just for parkland.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Yeah, you're not, if you're building a structure, then it's a little different, but that's a piece of
Okay,
equipment
so that will
to
be something that we'll need to
support.
know.
Yeah,
Like, what can we use it for, and do we have the funds to do it, to support it, all that kind of stuff, so. And then I know that there's people that have asked about whether or not we could fence in the basketball court, and I've been told as to why not to. It's still open for discussion, just because somebody says don't do it, doesn't mean it's the right answer, and some people will tell you do it.
you have to tell me, we left it, and them and I talked about this, you know, they were gonna observe it as well. I haven't seen basketballs flying out in the street.
No, that's not been the
main
issue.
concern.
I think the only thing that's gonna do is slow down a little bit of the noise, if you had a protective barrier, so
Oh,
not
you're
just.
saying you would not just a fence, you'd put like a windscreen on it or whatever.
Exactly,
Gotcha,
that's
gotcha.
what, and you see that in a lot of places, and I'm not
Yeah.
saying that's what we need to do, because the reason that I was told not to do that is because,
You can't see what goes on.
You can't
inside.
see what's going on inside
We'd
there.
have to look at a camera system as well to make sure we
yeah,
observe what happens.
so,
Yeah.
that was there's pros and cons to everything, we know that, because
Yeah.
there's a pro and con to having a basketball court.
Yes.
Clearly, so, you know, not making light of it, but I think that there's, you know, there's different things over there that I really would like to see what we can do. So, and I'm not, again, I don't know that fencing it is a good idea, I don't know that any of it. Again, we may have people coming unglued because we want to build a structure, I have no idea.
Oh, yeah, the arms.
And Mayor, just an observation, so
That's right,
so
about
that
that.
basketball court, of course, the concrete itself was extended a good 20 feet
Yes.
beyond the edge of the court, but you could put something there for people to sit on eventually, whether it's a
Yes.
bleacher, whether it's a
Exactly.
picnic table, whether, so you have something you can put stuff down for people to sit on.
Yeah.
Just depends when you wanna do it or what you wanna do.
Well, and again, I think that's part of what we should be doing, is discussing, do we want to do that? Do we want to, is that anything anybody has? Is that gonna cause more of a ruckus, because we're now inviting people? And again, I understand that nobody's gonna approve of any of that stuff, but we're not trying to get it done this year. I mean,
Sure, you're planning.
now, let me rephrase that. If it got done this year, great, but we wouldn't be trying to, I mean, and I will fully say this, I have a lot of people that are mad that the basketball court's open because of COVID. They've argued whether or not it's allowed to be, and all I'm gonna say is, I have read everything, obviously, one says to open it, says it's not for competitive games, one says, you should be monitoring them. Westerville, Gahanna, all of the other ones have opened theirs, that's all I'm gonna say. I'm following what everybody else is doing, because last time I checked, I didn't get dropped off that COVID manual of exactly how to do everything, and DeWine doesn't have like the perfect scenario, because he says, this is what's opening, and then like 3 weeks later, after we open it, then they start giving you rules. And that's exactly what they did with the pool. They were like, oh yeah, you can open your pool. And then they were like, oh, and by the way, here's your 732 rules you have to follow. So again, that's why that's still open, but I wouldn't be advertising the fact that we're trying to set up something to have 30 people in a birthday party, because people are gonna come unglued. But again, the goal is to do it later.
See, and these are the type of structures they use to cover
Yeah, that's all-
things like that,
yeah.
small things.
I'm not talking
you
about
can see-
anything over the top. I'm not talking
Yeah.
about $100,000 building.
Yeah, just things with cantilever or whatever. So
Just something for people to be able to,
things that go over course.
if it starts raining,
All kinds of stuff. All kinds of stuff you can do.
and again, I'm not even saying adding something to where they can have a grill or whatever. I'm not even going that far into it. That's just one of the things that I thought would be great, just to be able to put picnic tables underneath of something
Yep,
Yeah.
for them to,
yeah.
again, like they do in Westerville, Gahanna, and everywhere else, to be an actual park. Thoughts?
Yep. Very good.
Okay.
Well, it's almost 8:30.
New business? Old business?
I don't know if this is-
Anybody?
Yeah,
Tony?
I move to adjourn.
There you go.
okay. I'll second that.
We're all in favor.